Familiar to us. Thanks to join us. So please help me welcome Councilman Nehring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to see everybody and to be back with you. Always good to be here. And I'll tell you what, not every Rotary meeting that I come to has Girl Scout cookies. Thank you for having that. It's wonderful to see everybody. I think I know most of the folks in the room, but for those who don't know me, I'm Nate Nehring. I represent the northern part of the county on the county council, so Arlington, Marysville, Stanwood, Grand Falls, and Darrington. I've been on the council since 2017, so I'm in my second term right now. And really feel blessed to get to do the work that I do. Really enjoy it. There's a lot of great people that we get to work with, a lot of great community organizations such as the Rotary clubs, and we've got a lot of great things happening in Snohomish County. Some challenges too that we'll talk about, but a lot of opportunity. And
on the Snohomish County update from Nate Nehring.
Sure. I'll note, I born and raised in Marysville. My wife and I live here in Arlington, raising our three. Welcoming our fourth this summer. So we're playing the zone defense at home and having a lot of fun with that. But we really love living here in Snohomish County and look forward to raising our family here. So let's jump into the presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to leave time at the end. Feel free to throw your hand up and interrupt you, and we can stop wherever we need to for any questions. So public safety is always where I like to start. Okay, great. Public safety is always on top of mind for people, whether it's individuals in the community or businesses. This is always one of the main issues that people are interested in for good reason. And so on the screen here, you'll see some of our crime stats from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. This is 2024 in comparison to 2023. I won't go through each of these, but you can read through those for yourselves. One of the things that we're working on right now, in fact, I was just on a ride along a couple of weeks ago with our Sheriff's Office, is dealing with derelict RVs, like you can see in the picture here. In the southwest part of the county, where you've got really dense, unincorporated areas, we have scenarios where there's streets that look like this, right outside of neighborhoods, where you've got these dilapidated RVs that are parked out into the street and are often a magnet for drug use and other types of crime. And a lot of cities, including Arlington, I believe, have codes that don't allow for this. They say, you can't park a vehicle like this on the street for more than 72 hours. The county code is silent. So what I've been working on with the Sheriff's Office is creating a code to sort of model or mimic what cities have modeled and bring that to unincorporated county to help address issues like this. One of the main public safety concerns we have is the fentanyl crisis. And you all, I'm sure, are very familiar with this. Is anybody not familiar with fentanyl? Yeah, most of us have heard about it. So fentanyl is a drug that's 100 times more potent than morphine. It's very cheap to get, and it's very potent. And so it's causing a lot of devastation throughout our community. And obviously that's not unique to Snohomish County. That's applicable, I think, to any county throughout our entire country. But it causes problems for a whole host of reasons. I mentioned how addictive it is and how cheap it is. The other thing that I'll note is, we don't have any long-term fentanyl users. Sometimes, when talking with our social workers, you'll come across somebody who's been using, whether it's meth or heroin or whatever it is, and they're sort of a long-time user, they're a known commodity. You just don't have that with fentanyl because of how frequent the overdose rates are. People die within 1 or 2 years, tops usually. And so while we've seen some improvements with our homelessness numbers, as you'll see there, the point in time count shows the homelessness decreased last year. That doesn't bear out with overdose deaths or frankly with quality of life crimes that are often associated with drug use. And so we've still got a very rampant issue with drugs and with associated homelessness. And that's something that I think is a top priority for local governments to work on tackling. One of the things that we've done, and a lot of our cities have partnered with us on, is the Law Enforcement Embedded Social Worker Program, which I'm a big fan of. This partners up police officers and social workers to go out into the community to areas where there might be homeless encampments or other areas where people are in need of help. And this team, leads with compassion. The social workers there to offer services to get people into detox and treatment and housing. But the police officer is there to have an accountability side, right? You have the carrot and stick. And so if somebody refuses treatment and has outstanding warrants or is committing crimes, then the police officer is there to make sure that we're able to take care of that. I think that approach works really well. we hear about other areas where only the housing or the treatment are offered. And then if somebody says no, they just kind of get left there to continue using drugs under a bridge or on the street or whatnot, continuing to oftentimes commit quality of life crimes to feed that drug habit. And I just don't think there's anything compassionate about that. I don't think we can accept that as a community. I think the best thing we can do, and the most compassionate, frankly, for the individual who's struggling, is to make sure that we're getting that person into treatment so that they can get back on their feet and into a healthy and sustainable lifestyle. And I'll show you on the next slide here, we have some examples of some resources that are available. The county has invested quite a bit of capital dollars into making sure that we've got treatment facilities 24/7 operated so that our social workers, when they do encounter somebody who's willing to take on help, are able to get them in right away into detox and treatment and job training and housing and whatnot. I'll tell you the most difficult population that I think everybody around the state and around the country is trying to figure out how do we deal with this are those who, are termed as treatment resistant. These are people who are so deep into their addiction that they're not able to think clearly for themselves and to make the right decisions for their long-term health. And so just to give an example, I was out on a ride along with our law enforcement embedded social worker team a couple of months ago. And we were in a street that looked kind of like the one I showed a couple of slides ago where you had the dilapidated RVs. And the social worker went and knocked on the door of the RV, and a man came out, and she said, "Hey, we can get you in today to get detox, and we can get you off the streets and out of this situation." And he said, I've been through detox before, and I would rather die than go through it again. It was hell going through detox. And by all accounts, it is miserable getting off of these drugs and, the physical issues that come along with detoxing and the withdrawals that are associated, especially with a drug like fentanyl. But I think that illustrates how difficult it is for somebody who's in this situation where they are deep in addiction and dealing with homelessness to make the right decision for themselves. And so the question then is, well, what do we do about it? If the person is committing a crime or has an outstanding warrant, you can make an arrest. But typically they're going to just spend a couple of days in jail, and they're going to get cycled right back out on the street, and we're going to be dealing with the same thing all over again. So it's not a real long-term solution. So one of the things that the state legislature has been talking quite a bit about, and this is one of the few, I would say, bipartisan efforts that both Democrats and Republicans are in favor of, is the idea of involuntary commitment and applying that to really serious drug issues. So for those who are familiar with involuntary commitment, typically it's applied to mental health situations where somebody might be suicidal or a threat to themselves or others. And so Ricky's Law, which was passed by the state legislature, essentially applies that definition to those who are dealing with a serious drug issue, where they're a threat to themselves or others and not able to make the right decisions for themselves. And so somebody could be taken, and through a court order, they could be placed into treatment, basically as an alternative to jail. They could be forced to undergo treatment, and then once they're sober and back on their feet, then they can start to make those decisions for themselves. So this is a really difficult issue. It's a tragic one. And we all see it, I think, on the streets, and it's very, very difficult to deal with. There's no silver bullet all across the country. This is being dealt with. But I will say there is hope. It gives me a lot of hope to get to talk with some of the folks who have gone through these programs, who have worked with our embedded social workers and gone through treatment and are now out on the other side. There's lots of great stats here in Arlington and throughout North Snohomish County of people who have been successful. And it's really cool to get to hear from somebody who, was separated from their families, got addicted, lost their home, lost their job, was on the street, got help, and now are reunited with their families, active in their kids' lives, have, a meaningful job, they're back onto their feet. And so it can be done, but it's a lot of work and takes a lot of resources. So it's something that we continue to battle with. Next up is the county budget.
You don't have to.
Oh,
just arrow.
There we go. Thank you. So the county budget. So this week, I think all of us are receiving our property tax bills. So it's the best time of the year, right? We open the mail and we get the property tax bill from the county. And on your bill, you may see this on your bill, but this is the breakdown of how your property tax dollars are distributed. So when you receive your bill from the county treasurer, you'll see that the county treasurer collects the entirety of your property tax bill in your statement. Well, the county treasurer then distributes that to all these various junior taxing districts. So you'll see that the lion's share of the bill goes towards schools, both local school districts and state schools. And then you've got portions for cities, counties, fire districts, ports, libraries, a whole host of other junior taxing districts. And so You can see online what the breakdown is of exactly where your tax dollars are going. One of my biggest priorities as your representative has been to make sure that we're stretching your tax dollars as far as they can go and being as efficient as possible. My personal feeling is with all the inflation and high cost of living everyone's dealing with, in our personal families and in our businesses, we're having to make difficult decisions, right? Tighten our belts and figure out how we're going to make it work financially. And I don't think government should operate any differently. So I think it's critical that we look to increase efficiency, eliminate waste where it exists, and do all of that before we go out and ask for tax increases. And for that reason, I have consistently opposed property tax increases at the county level. Yes, question.
Talk a little bit about senior exemption.
Yeah.
How big is that? What's that do to? How do you?
Yeah, great question. So the question was on senior tax exemptions and what the impact is. So senior tax exemptions are available through the county assessor's office. You can apply, and if you meet a certain criteria, you're able to be eligible to have property taxes exempted or a portion of it. The state legislature just last year changed the eligibility, or they raised the threshold, or I should say they lowered the threshold so that more seniors are eligible. So if you are a senior and you're interested, that's something that you can look for through the county assessor's office. Essentially what that does, because the way that property taxes work is it's a levy-based system. So we set a levy rate, and then based on your property value, that gets distributed to every property owner, right? So when somebody gets an exemption, whether it's a senior exemption or let's say an open space exemption, if you're on ag land, that removes that parcel or that property from the pie, and in effect would increase the amount that the others would pay, because the levy remains the same. It doesn't reduce the levy when people get an exemption, and so it would increase everybody else's taxes. That's the way that works. Does that answer the question?
So getting to that point, I'm sorry.
We gotta use this so they can hear it.
Okay, so getting to that point. So if you sign up for the senior and you are approved for the senior, and then once you pass away, any of those that's not, once you sell it, once you have to get rid of your property, let's say you sell, your siblings sell the property or whatever, they aren't responsible for any taxes.
Correct. There's no back taxes. And the same is not true for open space. So open space is a scenario where if you've got like forestry land or ag land, you can apply for open space status or designation, which just means that you're not being taxed as if you had a home or the highest possible use of the land. You'd be taxed at whatever the actual use is, the open space. However, if you apply for that and receive that designation, and let's say you are operating a farm or forest land for a decade, and then you decide, well, now I want to build on it, then you would have to pay the back taxes. But that's not true for senior exemptions. Yeah.
But if you sell that property and the buyer extends that open space designation, are you responsible for that?
As long as the buyer does not build on it, if they continue to keep it in open space, then nobody has to pay any back taxes. Yeah, but if you're a buyer, and that's a good thing to check if you're buying property to make sure it hasn't been in open space, because if you bought a property with the intention of building, you would be responsible. So it's always a good thing to check when you're looking for property.
Hang on,
Okay, let's use the mic, please.
we have to.
Wait for question and answer.
How long is the look back on the open space? Is it 10 years or forever? Or, if you had open space for 20 years, would you pay tax on the 20 or?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, the idea of open space is to preserve ag land and open and forest land, those sorts of areas in perpetuity. So I don't think there's a time where that will allow. Questions? Okay, so continuing on with the budget. So typically the county budget process is, the county executive works with departments to develop a proposed budget to fund a whole host of services the county provides. And that includes services to folks who live in cities, as well as folks who are in unincorporated areas. Our county sheriff's office, our county parks, our county roads, our court system, our elections, and a whole host of other services. Then in September, the executive transmits that budget to the county council, and we spend a couple of months deliberating and making potential changes before voting to adopt a budget just before Thanksgiving. This past year, we did something different. We transitioned to what's called a biennial budget. which just means that we pass a budget for a 2-year period instead of a 1-year period. And so we did the county's first ever biennial budget this past November, and that was over a $3 billion budget. So it's a significant amount of dollars. That includes funding from your property taxes, your sales taxes, and a lot of state and federal grants. So it was to fund a whole host of services like I described. Is there a question? Yeah.
So you mentioned it also includes state and federal.
Yep.
What's going on with the federal government right now? How is that gonna affect the budget that you just put in place?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We've been receiving this question quite a bit. There's a lot of eyes on this. So right now, nothing has been changed. However, depending on what happens at the federal level, that could change. So for example, our Human Services Department is almost exclusively grant funded. And so if there were changes at the federal level that stopped funding or removed funding for grants that go to human services, we would need to make associated cuts. But as of right now, there are no changes. Good question.
What projects are inside that?
What projects are inside of human services? What kind of things would happen if those went away?
Some like the capital treatment facilities that were on the previous slide, a lot of those are funded through human services dollars. Also, our roads projects are typically multi-million-dollar projects. So we'll put some county funds in, but then we usually leverage either state or federal grant funds. I would like to think that if the federal government, makes a decision to withhold funding, that would be forward-looking as opposed to retroactive, because it would put us in a really difficult spot if they withheld grant funds that have already been committed and we've already broke ground on and are essentially, locked into. So again, it's something that we're tracking very closely, all the departments at the county, and I think all local governments are watching this very closely. But as of right now, there have been no changes. Here are some projects in North Snohomish County to highlight. I won't go through each one of those, but for those who have been out to the Oso Slide Memorial, a really great tribute there. We had the 10-year anniversary recently where that was unveiled. Strawberry Fields, we've got some improvements. The 67th Avenue project, anybody who's driven there, we had that study that was done and the speed reduction and 2 freeway stops to ensure safety at 67th, where we were having lots of accidents. Kayak is another one that's undergoing a significant amount of improvements. And then here are some more local projects. It was mentioned earlier, and a really great partnership with the Rotary Club here, as well as the city of Arlington on the Jensen Park pump track. So every year in our budget, we have about $150,000 that we're allowed to appropriate per district on capital projects. That means usually parks related projects or improvements. So this year, the idea was brought forward from this club, from the Arlington Rotary, a really great idea on the pump track. And I'm pleased that the county was able to step in and help work with the city to help support that project, and appreciate all the great work you're doing to make that happen. That's a really great asset for the community. Yeah, of course. And you can see some of the other projects here. Pickleball courts at Howler Middle School. I know it was just at the city council a couple of weeks ago, and we have the crosswalk that's being built at one of the middle schools as well. Talked already about the SR 530 Slide Memorial. I also chair the Conservation Futures Board, which is tasked with using grant funds to conserve land, open space, habitat, farmland. And so we appropriated almost $10 million in grants this past year. One of those went to the 90 Farms Conservation Easement here in Arlington, and a whole host of others that you can find online if you're interested. Yeah.
Talk loud. No.
It said on there for the park 150K, and when the grant was 100K, or is there another 50 coming to us?
So this is for the bathroom, I believe.
Okay.
So there's both the bathroom being built and then the pump track is separate. Okay. Yeah. So you remember how much? Yeah. So I think it's actually 250K in the actual pump track.
I saw last night on the news about what's being called the Jordan Creek Bridge,
Yes.
but we've always known it as the Jim Creek that comes out there. Is it technically Jordan Creek? Jordan?
Yeah, in county government, it's always referred to as Jordan Creek.
How, for years, all my life, it's been Jim Creek, and what do you call it? It runs through your property, right? Is there a branch? Okay. Okay.
So moving on to economic development, Cascade Industrial Center is right here up north. I know we've talked about this before, so you're all very familiar. But we've got the 4,000 acres of manufacturing industrial land here around the airport going into the northern part of Marysville. And lots of innovative businesses that are coming in and locating. And I think the cities, this was before my time, but both cities, Arlington and Marysville, did a really good job in prior years of preserving this space for a jobs center. There's been lots of attempts by developers and others to turn this into multifamily housing, this zone. And it's one of the few areas where family wage jobs can be located and sited in all of our state, frankly. And so I think as a result, we're seeing some of these businesses come in. And I think this is key when we talk about sort of the housing and the jobs balance. I saw a stat recently that over 50% of Snohomish County residents are having to commute outside of Snohomish County for work, whether that's down to King County or wherever they're going. And so I think it's critical that we have places in our county so that our kids, when they're coming up to our schools, can find jobs in their community that pay well and allow them to continue to live where they love. Yes.
At one time, Tesla was discussed about a parts, facility there. I don't see it up there. Is it still on the agenda?
It is open, I believe. Yeah, so Tesla's here. Yeah, the parts. Yep. I can't remember if it's on Arlington or the Marysville side. I know it's off it. It's Marysville side. Good question. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. We talk about workforce development. I think I've talked to somebody about this before. The Arlington School District is a great participant and sends several students through this program. As all of us know, there's sort of this national trend to away from the trades, removing shop class from high schools and that sort of thing, and pushing students down the four-year college pathway. And there's nothing wrong with the four-year college pathway. I took that, and I know plenty of people do, and can lead to successful careers and whatnot. But I think it's really critical that we give our young people, our students, as many post-secondary options as possible, whether that's four-year college, community college, entrepreneurship, the military, the trades. There's all sorts of pathways that can lead to great careers. And so one of the things I'm most proud of to have been able to partner on is working with our local school districts, our local labor unions, and industry leaders on putting together the Regional Apprenticeship Pathways Program. And how many are familiar with the Running Start program? Okay, good. So the RAP program is basically, it's Running Start, but for the trades. So it brings the trades into the high school, and students during their junior and senior year go and they work with their hands, they learn the safety skills and all the other skills that are needed in order to have a successful career in the trades. They get people coming in who are actually from the trades to work with them hands-on, and they do projects like building tiny homes that are then donated. And so they get some great education, and then when they graduate, they get their high school diploma, a credential from every community college, and then they get either preferred or direct entry into a state-certified apprenticeship program for one of the, I think, dozen or so labor partners that are a part of this program. So this has been really cool to see. It started off small with just, I think, 25 students the first year. Students throughout Snohomish County, although a good portion are from Arlington. Since then, it's grown, and now it's 100 students per year that are being served. We went to the state legislature and asked for them to help to fund this program. They did that. And now, this past session, this was actually used as a model statewide. And so the state legislature, their House Education Committee came to Snohomish County to visit the RAP Center. And they said, we want to do these all over the state. So they passed a bill and used this as a model, and they're now plugging these in other areas of the state. So it's been really cool to see that, and really cool to talk with the kids who are going through this. I had kind of a special moment. I was a middle school teacher for a brief period of time before joining the county council. And one of the students I had in my middle school class went through the RAP program and placed like first in the entire state on some skills competition, and is now working in a labor job and getting good paying benefits. So I think it's just really cool to have those opportunities for our kids. I think this is the last slide. So I've touched on some of the policy issues related to county government. Civil discourse is something I'm really passionate about, and this is some really fulfilling work that I've had the chance to participate in. So county government is by and large very nonpartisan. Most of the work we do, doesn't have Democrat or Republican labels. We're filling potholes, we're citing parks, we're dealing with public safety and economic development. However, we do have to run under partisan labels. So I'm an elected Republican. My colleague here is an elected Democrat, and we've made a point of trying to find common ground, work across the aisle where we can, and had the chance to go out into several schools. Actually, I think we had a meeting in this room last year, and go out into the community, but particularly with young people, and talk about the importance of being willing to work with those, even if you disagree with them. I think it's really important, again, for all ages, but especially for young people, to understand that even if you have a political disagreement with somebody, it doesn't mean you have to hate that person or call them names. You can shake hands and you can find something else that you do agree on and work together on that. And so this has been really rewarding work to get to work with the kids and others on improving civil discourse. We've also hosted a civic education day at the county campus. Our third year was this year. And this is something else that started small, where we had students come to learn more about government. And this year we had over 300 kids storm the county campus. And you should have seen the faces of everyone else on the campus going, what is going on here with all these kids coming? But it was really cool to see the participation from our young people and schools in that. I think that's all I have. I don't know how we're doing on time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And maybe one thing I would just note before we open it up for questions, I try to keep an open door policy at the county council. I feel very blessed that I get to serve you all. I really love the work that I get to do. And I'll tell you, most of the good ideas that we work on at the county come directly from the community. It's very rare that a county council member sits and brings up a great idea. So the pump track at Jensen Park is a great example. But if you ever have ideas that we can, do to change policy or improvements that can be made, or criticisms or questions, I would love to hear from you. So you have my contact information here, my email and cell phone, and please feel free to reach out anytime. Would love to chat with you about any ideas you might have.
What is county council?
We meet Tuesdays and Wednesdays, generally from like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I realize that's a very inconvenient time. I don't know why it's that way. That's in our charter. We do have night meetings. We've got one coming up next month. And so I can keep you appraised if you're interested in attending a meeting.
Back to your program that you guys have for your skills, for lack of better words. Is there a way to expand on that for life skills for kids nowadays? I noticed that there's home economics, which a lot of us went through, balancing a checkbook, making a budget, being able to change a tire with it. As many households in Snohomish County that only have one parent, and many, many different.
I agree. I think those sorts of skills are critical. And I have seen certain school districts that do a good job of promoting those. In this program, I know there's a lot of focus on the soft skills as well, because a lot of our labor partners will say it doesn't matter how much you know if you don't know how to show up to work on time or how to communicate with somebody. So the soft skills are highlighted.
Just an addendum, my son became a CNC mechanic through the Running Start program.
I was thinking when you were talking about homelessness, and that really applies kind of more to the cities than the county, but are we that, the city will buy a bombed out apartment building or a hotel and turn it into homeless? Does that work?
My personal opinion is no. The county did buy 2 hotels to do exactly that, to convert to homeless housing. I voted against that. I don't think it's the best idea. And so I guess we'll wait to see if it works. They're not open yet. But, I'm a big fan of making sure that we're treatment focused. And I think too often we focus too much on just how do we get roofs over people's heads. And then once somebody's in a unit, we can kind of say, we're done, they're housed, we don't have to worry about it anymore. But for most people, not everybody, but for most people, there's an underlying addiction or mental health issue or both. So just housing them does not do the trick. You've got to get to the root of the issue. You got to get them onto a treatment program. And so it's frustrating to see just kind of the only housing focus.
I have another question about that. So I know that there's programs in Oregon that they started with safe places for people to park RVs or people that are living in their cars, such as that. And now that program is growing into a program where they're building, like in the same areas, building a whole bunch of tiny homes where those same people that are chronically unhoused and they're meeting them where they're at instead of putting them into rapid housing where they are back on the streets because they have other own issues. Have we considered doing anything like what they're similar doing in Oregon?
So I know that the Everett Gospel Mission has, house shelters, which I think is a pretty similar concept. So they've got house shelters, and those are for people who are like in the throes of a deep addiction and are not ready to have their own home or whatnot. And they're not taking treatment. They're actively dealing with addiction. And so what the Gospel Mission program looks like is they start with the pallet shelters, and then once they're in a place where they've gotten people into treatment, they then graduate them into more of a community style living, and then kind of the end of the scale is when you're in your own unit. And so I know that they operate that. The Mission county government does not have anything like the RV area that you mentioned, but it's an interesting idea.
Nick, do you have an update on the White Horse Trail, the upgrade from Darrington to Arlington, the great service to the community if that would be available as a bike track? How far are we out on that?
Absolutely. That's a good question. I don't know the exact answer, so I'll have to get back to you on that. I know White Horse has been in our capital improvement plan in the Parks Department for several years now, so should be very soon, but let me check with our Parks Director and get back to you.
Not a question, but you, obviously, there's a lot of emphasis and discussion here about problems with drugs. If any of you want to educate yourself more about what's going on in the world today with drugs, where it came from, read the book Dope Sick by Beth Macy. It starts out with the very earliest opium and goes right through where we are today with fentanyl. Good book. I haven't read the book, but I've seen the movie, and it's really moving. It's unbelievable. There's a movie out of Dope Sick, worth reading. Really well done.
Okay, one question. No, hey, another question is, you go back to the homeless people, you got the trailers out. You got people that are living in trailers, even though they have jobs, but they can't afford the housing because they don't make enough to afford affordable rent. Is there a possibility of building tiny homes that they can rent, they have a place to stay, and they're not in trailers on the streets?
Yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. I'll tell you, one of my biggest frustrations with the housing system, and this kind of goes back to the question about federal grants as well. The federal government, the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has a mandated criteria with their federal dollars that come through, which is most of the dollars, basically a priority list. And at the top of that list is people that have an addiction. And so, you know, if you have somebody who, let's say, is a homeless veteran, or somebody who just lost their job or isn't making enough money and is struggling to afford a house, they end at the bottom of the list. And the people at the top of the list are people who sometimes don't even want housing. It's somebody who is addicted and living on the street and maybe is going to reject the offer if it comes. But because the federal government has that mandate, we can't, you know, we could build a facility and we wouldn't be able to serve the people that you're talking about. And so we've gone through everybody else. So that's very frustrating. That's one of the things I've been reaching out to our congressional delegation on, is to see if we can get that changed, because it just makes very little sense to me. Yeah.
So on the same topic, but it's going to be partnerships. And we had a church approached by a man who had a daughter who was homeless. So he went and applied at Housing Hope. And we housed him for a short period of time in a trailer that was on some people's property. But that Housing Hope has social workers and educational training and checkups in the room. And why don't you partner with them in that housing unit to hold them accountable for the performance of progression? That's what I think they called this event this gentleman went through. Help him get a job. I think he ended up with FedEx. Daughter was given supervision and babysitting during that time. But it just struck me that these guys really know what they're doing, and it has that teaching soft skills to people who don't know how to really live in society. And they've got that system set up here. I think a powerful organization. Do you partner with them, or instead of just buy a hotel and put people in it and hope the hell they make it?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Housing Hope does a phenomenal job, and there's others like them that are doing good work. And we do partner in the sense that we help to fund some of that work through the federal grants. The counties have to, and so we make decisions on who gets funding. So we do partner with Housing Hope in that sense. I would love to see the county do something like you're suggesting, where instead of buying these hotels and just turning them into no barrier housing that nobody's gonna hold anybody accountable for, let's turn those around to Housing Hope and let them run their programs. I think that'd be a great idea. The problem is there's frankly not the political will to do that. The majority are in a position of saying we need to focus on no barrier housing without mandating treatment, without holding people accountable. So until we get a change in political will, I don't think.
One more question.
So Nate, there's a limitation on how much local taxes can be raised by state law. There's been some discussion about, from some of the municipalities, about getting that changed because it's not keeping up with inflation. Has the county taken a position on that?
Yeah, so right now, the initiative process, Washington voters, I don't know what year it was, passed an initiative to cap property tax increases at 1%. So every local government raised them by a maximum of 1%, unless they go out to the voters. You wanted to take 2% or 5 or 10, you could do it, but you need to go to the voters and ask on the ballot. This year in the Washington state legislature, there's a bill that would increase that cap from 1% to 3%. So I have two answers for you. Personally, I'm opposed to it because I think the voters said very clearly they want to cap it at 1%. And I think there's that mechanism for people, if they want to take more, they just need to go out and ask the voters for that and make the case on the ballot. So I'm not a big fan of elected officials kind of bypassing the public and saying, we're just going to raise it ourselves to 3%. But I will say the county has taken a position in support. So Snohomish County is supporting the bill. I personally am opposed to it.